Context and clarity on some pronouncements which were made by Mr. Stuart James Scharnick with regards to investigations. At least many cases were opened in this province. That's why we saw it fit that we should give some clarity on them. But before you is the acting Deputy Criminal Commissioner of this province, responsible for crime detection, with two of these provincial heads, one for serious violence crime and one for young detectives. So he will go through the remarks, then he will have time to ask on what will have been said today. Without wasting any time, General, please take us through.
Thank you, Colonel Nchwenda. Good afternoon, media houses, reporters present. As indicated, I'm the Acting Deputy Provincial Commissioner for Crime Detection in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, Major General Anthony Gopaul. The portfolio extends to general investigations, serious organized crime, serious and violent crime, investigations and your familiar FCS units, as well as commercial crime. Today I'm also joined by two of the provincial heads with me today. That's on my right hand side, it's Brigadier Ntuli for Criminal Investigation Services, and on my left is Brigadier Kunene from the Serious and Violent Crimes Unit. What brings us here today, members of the media and the public at large that is watching, is the fact that there's been much conversation in the media pertaining to investigations that was undertaken in KwaZulu-Natal. And in this particular specific instance, I'm referring to the investigations that came up in the Madlanga Commission, where initially Lieutenant General Khumalo cited certain cases and convictions and a history or record of a one Mr. Stuart Scharnick. His report and his statements in the Madlanga Commission prompted Mr. Stuart to make certain public statements and announcements. I want to just summarize specifically what he had said in that particular, so we put context to his concerns regarding these cases. In the same evening of that briefing, Mr. Stuart indicated that his convictions runs from 2010 to 2011, and it had 18 counts on one case. If you go back to the clip, you'll realize that he talks about one case with 18 counts. And he indicates that he was sentenced to 5 years suspended sentence, and a portion of money was paid. His sentence was, his suspended sentence has since lapsed, and then there were cases where the state had withdrawn. He had various cases which he had reflected on, but he chose then to talk about the one that was resolved only in the court. On November 12th, Mr. Stuart also went back to the media, and then he made certain pronouncements and accusations or leveled allegations against the institution of the South African Police Service. In part of making such allegations against the South African Police Service by virtue of Lieutenant General Khumalo, who had made those statements in his capacity as the head of crime intelligence. By that virtue, South African Police Service then becomes the bearer of such allegations. And he was quite vocal to indicate he intends to join the current acting minister and the South African Police Service to that particular action he intends to take in the matter. Now, I want to then reflect on a few things. Why would we want to call this particular briefing? For the purpose of record, all the cases, whether General Khumalo had referred to it, whether it's Lieutenant General Khumalo had referred to those cases, and the cases that Mr. Stuart Scharnick is referring to, they were cases in terms of that particular conviction that were cases in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. So in that, it came to a point where both parties, Lieutenant General Khumalo as well as Scharnick, was referring to very serious cases of hijacking, theft of motor vehicles. And what comes out is that this matter was somehow settled through a plea where a slap on the wrist was given to somebody. And in the case of Mr. Stuart, he is vehemently denying that he was charged on 18 cases. He says he was charged only on one case with many counts. Now, members of the media, I want to then go into one aspect which compromises the integrity of investigations in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, because it then leaves one to ask the question, if he says it's only one case, what happened to the other cases that were serious charges levels against him? And I want to then go into a breakdown of these cases and indicate to you what we have been undertaking. So as a result, in KwaZulu-Natal, we have then called for the profile of Mr. Stuart. We've looked at it in terms of cases where in KwaZulu-Natal he was a subject of investigation, where he was a alleged suspect in the particular matter. We have physically perused each and every one of those cases, and we've been through every single document in every single case file. I want to highlight a few observations that we have made through this exercise. So the first thing I would want to indicate is that we have looked at 29 criminal case dockets, where, so you have been listening to a version of 18 counts. You heard a story of 18 counts on one case. I'm going to show you a picture of unpacking 29 cases against this particular individual in the province of KwaZulu-Natal and what types of crimes it relates to. I'm going to then start by indicating firstly that 10 of these 29 dockets were part of that plea was related to theft of motor vehicle. The cover of the docket, the charge, the vehicle involved, it's a vehicle, it's a theft of motor vehicle. 8 of these 29 cases that I'm referring to were cases of carjacking. So cases of carjacking. Now if you know, carjacking is slightly different from theft of motor vehicle. In theft of motor vehicle, a car is stolen without interaction in some cases, or there's no interaction with the victim. The car just gets stolen through various means. But when you talk about carjacking, we're talking about a violent crime, where force and an extent and a level of aggressive emotion and actions are taken against victims. Now these were 8 such cases. So that gives you a total of 18 cases. So if you understand what we spoke about earlier, Mr. Stuart talks about 18 counts on one case. There are 18 case dockets, a combination of hijackings and theft of motor vehicle that we are talking about. These dockets at the time of investigation we did not see how it ended up into being centralized, but it became centralized to the Serious Organized Crime Unit within the Directorate of Priority Investigations. This is purely from looking at the physical docket before us. We're not talking about anybody making a statement somewhere. We're talking about a physical inspection of every docket. These dockets come from all over KwaZulu-Natal. And members of the media and the public, I will start to cite some of these dockets specifically related to theft of motor vehicles and hijackings. One of such matter was in the Durban Central area, which is a theft of motor vehicle. So, in the theft of motor vehicle, it took place where the complainant confirms in his A1 affidavit that his car was stolen from him. We have the details of who the investigating officer, as I said, it was centralized. This is one of those dockets, and it was pulled together with the other dockets. The next case was in Hillcrest. It was a carjacking. This case of carjacking, he was also charged for, and it forms part of the plea agreement that was signed at court. The next case that I will refer to is the case of theft of motor vehicle from Durban North. The following case is a case of carjacking, again at Chatsworth. The next one is a case of carjacking in Westville. We have another case of carjacking in Newlands East. We have a theft of motor vehicle in Townhill, a carjacking again in Sydenham, a carjacking in Pinetown, a theft of motor vehicle in Durban North, a theft of motor vehicle in Townhill, a carjacking in Malvern. Howick is a theft of motor vehicle. In Maryhill is carjacking. In Bratton Beach it's burglary residential. In Richards Bay it's another case. I'm going to come back to that. I will specifically focus on the theft of motor vehicle and a carjacking. Again, another carjacking in theft of motor vehicle and housebreaking in Mpangeni. Then another theft of motor vehicle in Hillcrest. And we have then another theft of motor vehicle in Maiden Wharf. I will come to the other cases in a short while. What we find in all of these cases to which the plea, so the court will better explain their processes of how they have accepted this plea. For now, we cannot, and I will not attempt to indicate what would have informed the court at that time to enter into a plea of all these serious crimes against this particular accused in court to the fine that he paid. So I'm producing to you, members of the public and media, that there are 18 such dockets. These dockets, when you open these dockets, it is syndicated. If you understand organized crime, it is syndicated. In most of these dockets, Mr. Stewart is the one who had sold these people who had possession of the cars. In some instance, he was in possession of a car. But in majority of the cases, he sold these cars to people. And when you go into these dockets, there are very common actors that facilitate and enable organized crime to take place. From a scrapyard dealer, to a police clearance, to a registration of the vehicle, there's a whole chain involved. So in that docket, there's a lot of compelling evidence that suggests a lot more than what the plea was made out to be. You can ask yourself, if a person is in possession of a stolen property for one hijacked car, what should be an appropriate sentence? What would be, as the National DPP and the DPP will put it, how will justice be served, and what will be in the public's interest for a person who is a victim of carjacking, where the person who played a role in whichever way, whether it's a role of facilitating that hijacking or whether it's a role of receiving stolen property and selling them and creating a market for it, whatever the role, there's trauma in carjackings to the victim. So one will ask, in that particular instance, if you accepted a charge or gave a plea of a lower sentence, such as wholly suspended for 5 years, and now you don't do it for the one case, you put it there as if it is one case in court, but there are 18 criminal case dockets that we are talking about. So in court, these dockets went to court. Like I say, members of the media, I cannot pronounce on what legal position and mandate is undertaken and the process. I cannot prescribe or comment on it. It is something for the NPA to comment on as to how they arrived at that plea for so many of these cases. And you consolidate all these 18 dockets, you call it one case, and you give one sentence of 5 years suspended, and you say there's a fine that you can pay of 150,000 rand over 5 years. I leave that to the NPA, but I'm not making a statement that I'm leaving to the NPA. Following this media briefing, as we've gone and done this analysis, and we've done an in-depth analysis from the time we realized that KZN investigations are coming under the spotlight, we have a fantastic work done. How did it end up in this way? Now, we cannot allow us to just keep quiet and make a media briefing. So we are preparing 2 dossiers. One will go to the Director of Public Prosecutions, where we're highlighting what our findings was. And members of the media, I must tell you that I'm giving you a summary of the findings. I've hinted to you that in the docket we see very clear actors and people in the organized crime part of this vehicle syndicated crimes. So we are referring this to the NPA to review what scope or role or mandate was undertaken by the prosecutor. Did he have that delegation to do that? Was it approved? And those type of things. We also will send a separate dossier to the Magistrate Judicial Commission for them to undertake an exercise to determine whether the magistrate was provided with all the relevant information when he accepted this plea from the accused. So that is a part we will leave for the judicial system. So I think when we talked about the certain aspects that needs to be looked at within the prosecutorial authority as well as the judicial system, it is what has always been played out in the media. I want to then talk and touch on a few other matters that did come up during the press conversations of Mr. Stewart, as well as certain aspects that came out from Lieutenant General Khumalo. But before I go there, I want to then go back. I indicated to you, I'll come back and tell you about the other cases that was leveled against Mr. Stewart in addition to these cases, and how those cases then was resolved. So when you look at the other cases, I want to point out to you the cases that are not vehicle related and the cases that are on other matters. There's one matter that is related to an assault GBH that was committed, and in this particular offense there was a fine of 3 months or imprisonment of 3,000 rand. There's another matter of common assault and pointing of firearm, and here the imprisonment was for 30 days or a fine of 1,500 rand. Then there was another matter where there was an assault GBH, and the matter was not enrolled because at the latter part of the investigation the victim changed his statement about certain aspects of what happened on the assault. Then we have another case which was withdrawn in court, and that's a Mpengeni case, and that's for theft of motor vehicle. Then we have another case that is also withdrawn at court because of insufficient evidence that was leveled against Mr. Scharnick, was common robbery. That's in Richards Bay. We have another matter that was also declined to prosecute. It's a common assault. We have another matter that was resolved through the ADR process, which is an alternative dispute resolution, which was assault, GBH, and pointing a firearm. We have another matter where he was accused of possession of unlicensed firearm and ammunition, and in that particular matter, he was found not guilty for various evidence that was lacking in proving the charge. Then he was also found not guilty on a malicious injury to property docket in the Richards Bay area. He was also found not guilty in another matter for discharging of firearm in a public place in a Richards Bay matter. And he was also found not guilty in the Maidenwharf matter for the theft of motor vehicle. Why do I reflect on the full history of the cases of Mr. Stuart Scharnick? Because of a statement he made that his reputation and his image is being tarnished. I think we have to reflect on this number of cases, and you look at the cases, both from the vehicle crime cases, and you look at the other cases that involves some form of aggression in terms of allegations against him. So you can see, I'm not sure when we talk about the South African police must defend itself of saying something, because Mr. Stewart has indicated that Lieutenant General Khumalo is the one who is acting on behalf of SAPS, and then he intends to cite SAPS in a civil litigation. So when he says his reputation is being violated, then when I look at this history that I've provided, I'm trying to ask myself, what is factual here about your reputation? How will the South African police services be backfooted on what we know about you and the history that you provide us through your interaction with the criminal justice system? And that's the information we have. Now let me address the news of the media, the other two issues that one must reflect on. During the process of profiling Mr. Scharnick, we had to understand there's a number of things that comes up that makes us ask some questions. One of them is this issue of him having a criminal conviction where he says that he's cleared of that. He doesn't have a criminal record. When we look at the criminal record system, I am unfortunately here to tell you that during the month of January this year, we went into the system to do an audit of this part of his information. In our course of doing this preliminary investigation, on the 16th of January at 16:58 in the afternoon of that day, a particular employee of the South African Police Services went into the criminal record system and made some adjustments to the benefit of Mr. Stuart Scharnick. That's why Mr. Scharnick is so confident to say there will be nothing on the system. Unfortunately, the particular employee doesn't understand the full extent of auditing side of the back end of systems. And on the back end of systems, the transactions which he deleted reflects and remains on the back end of the system. Further, we would want to indicate there was some indication that you can apply for an expansion of a conviction, and such expansion, then you get an approval and it then can be taken off the system, which is correct. You can, but there are certain provisions and conditions in certain offenses and the fine cannot exceed a certain amount of money. In his case, it was 150,000 rand as a fine. The threshold was 20,000 rand. So there's no way one would suggest that he could have obtained an expansion of these offences from his criminal record. It's possible, yes, on some of the assault cases which is older than 10 years and those type of things where there's an option of a fine and no imprisonment, but not on that instance where the fine is higher than 20,000 rand. So those are still there on the back end of the system, which we have discovered. And I want to indicate that the entire forensic side of the system investigation will now be continuing to bring that evidence forward and to hold that employee accountable. Now, of course, we're not sure whether the employee was prompted by somebody or the employee read an expansion of the one case and then thought all the cases should be expanded. We're not sure whether the employee did it intentionally or was it a lack of understanding of what should be done in the system. But when you look at the timelines, it suggests to us that there was something that was done to the preference of this individual. Now, in that process of this entire Madlanga Commission and the comments of Mr. Stuart Scharnick, we also pick up there's this to and fro about whether he's a security officer and whether he's not. That part we can confirm that he is not registered as a security officer. Then you ask yourself certain questions about his profile, and when we then start to look at his profile, we pick up Mr. Scharnick owns firearms. In specific, he owns 5 firearms. We ask ourselves a question: how will a person with convictions acquire a firearm license? And for what purpose? When we go into the systems, we then start to understand the process that was unfolding for him to acquire these licenses. I want to take just a minute to unpack these application processes so you understand it. Members of the media, everything I'm speaking of is a summary, and as you can see, this file is still a summary of the extent of dockets. If I had to bring those dockets, they will fill this table up. So when we unpack the system of these 5 firearms, there's 2 processes that you follow when you apply for firearm. The first part is to acquire a competency certificate, which talks to the proficiency of you, how you handle firearms. And once you've passed that stage, you then go into the stage of applying for a license for a firearm. In the first instance, we can say that on the first time he made an application was in 2015. So he made an application, but then he withdrew it in 2015. Made it in February, and then he withdrew that application for a competency certificate. The second time he made an application, again, in Richards Bay, he made an application and it was refused. In that refusal, the reasons for the refusal was failed to disclose previous conviction, failed to disclose outstanding cases. So he had a previous conviction that we picked up on him, and we picked up that he had current cases pending against him in specific 3 cases, which he didn't declare during the time of his application. And then on the third application, where he makes to get a competency certificate again, he then says failed again or refused because you failed to disclose the pending criminal cases. Then he makes a 4th application. In the 4th application, still at Richards Bay, that was made in 2022, he made a 4th application in that application, it seems that he was, after making the application, we have not gotten the fact on where his movement was, but at the time of that approval, the application is still at Richards Bay for this competency certificate, but his approval is now given to him, and the address on his approval is now showing a address in Gauteng. So that was the competency certificate for the training part. The second part we then discovered is then when you have that certificate, you then have to apply for a license. In that license process of application, his license, his first application of the license he made, which was made in 2023 in February, was approved in July 2023. And that application that he had approved was just for a .338 firearm. The second application he then made in 2023 was refused. Now, you'll work out the reasoning whether it's valid. It says here he was refused on this application where he applied for a handgun because he did not have the prescribed reason to possess as a dedicated person. The third application he made it for a handgun again, which was made in May. And that he got an approval in August of 2023, the same year. And then he made a fourth application where he applied for another rifle, which was then approved in August 2023. And then the fifth application he made for again another rifle, which was made in 2023 on the 5th month and approved on the 8th month. The sixth application he made was in 2023 on the 5th month also, and approved also in the 8th month, was for a shotgun. Now, all these firearms that he applied for, you have to provide reasons. According to our records on the application and the system that it was granted for, it is citing that he applied for these firearms for the purpose of sporting. There's a category in the Firearms Control Act, section 16 of the Firearms Control Act 50 of 2000, which talks to the issue of a categories of applications of license. And in this instance, he applied for a sporting license, a license to possess a firearm for the purpose of sporting. I'm sure by now you would have seen already that is circulating in the media. There is a clip of Mr. Stuart Scharnick in public brandishing a rifle, and the posture and the demeanor suggests that he's a security person in some sort. So one would then realize that sporting is different from being in a security company. There are different provisions, rules that govern it. You have to be registered with PASIRA. You must have a number of compliance issues as a business, your business premises and all that. We are yet to get into that part of the investigation, members of the media, that we are, like I say, this was systems and what we see physically in the dockets here on the case. When it comes to these, we are still going to be looking in the file. What is contained in his motivations? How did he acquire these permits? How did he acquire these licenses with this conviction that he had on him? So that's a process we are still undertaking as we proceed with this particular inquiry that we are making. Now, I want to then indicate also that as part of this particular investigation, and I did say earlier on that I will be making references to or referring certain aspects to both sides of the National Prosecuting Authority as well as the Magistrates Commission, the Judicial Commission. We now note that the addresses also differ on these applications when it comes to firearm from the time of applying. So it's obvious he has moved residence. So we will want to see how and when and what compliance was undertaken by the firearms officer at the particular stations. In this particular instance, we will be reflecting on 2 police stations of interest that handled his firearm applications. The detail I reserve it so that you could allow us to investigate those matters. I indicated the preliminary investigations of the system that we are busy with. Our investigations are going to continue. We are mindful that investigations are complex, especially organized crime investigations, and it takes time, and you will wonder what happens, and you find no responses to what's happening until you find we are now appearing at court with a particular suspect. So those investigations will continue. We are continuing with the investigation on all these aspects, and we will then provide a further detail of these cases. So really, members of the media and the public, the idea of this briefing is to bring context to the South African Police Service, specifically in KwaZulu-Natal, that when we do investigations, we do take it to court. We do rely on what we call PGI investigations, prosecution-guided investigations, and we work very closely with the NPA to come to dealing with crime as a collective and addressing criminals as a collective. And so we really will take this matter back to what we've seen in the dockets as to where and how it ended up having 15 serious crimes settled with a sanction of 5 years wholly suspended for lesser offenses. I will stop at that. Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you, General. By now you know that when we talk police, we talk facts, and those are the facts we have on our system. You will recall that one theft of motor vehicles because they will at least carry 10 years sentence, and one hijacking will carry 15 years. But for all of them, the settled honestly for 5 years, wholly suspended. The reason why we had this press briefing. We will now take questions, of which I don't think there will be many. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's start with this 5. General, I will take them one you answer or I'll take them down.
I'll jot them down.
Let's go.
Major General Gopaul, Jade from the SABC News. I've just got a couple of questions. I don't know if I can ask. Okay. My first question to you is, you said that SAPS works very closely with the NPA and that there were 15 serious crimes that were committed by Mr. Scharnick. My question to you is, this has come to light now that Mr. Scharnick has opened a case against General Khumalo. Why did police not challenge the court's decision with regards to all these cases? That's the first one. The second one is, you spoke about some of these cases being consolidated. I imagine that many of them occurred in different courts. So how is that possible, that they were consolidated? And then my third question to you, the investigation into that member who accessed the system, is there an investigation as this person interfered with police activity, and do we know if she's still a member of the force? Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you very much. I think she has already covered part of the question I wanted to ask. Why is the employee who deleted the records of Mr. Scharnick, is he still at work or is he fired? Thank you.
It's Pila from Newsroom Africa. I'm keen on knowing, from these investigations that you have done, does it appear if Mr. Scharnick has links to high-profile connections to this province, and by that I'm talking about maybe senior police officers and or politicians. Thank you.
Desmond out here from ENCA. General, thanks for the briefing. I'll also start with that employee because I think that seems to be a point of interest for everyone. I'm not sure if I missed it, but is that employee based here? Is that a KZN employee or is that an employee from the head office? And I wanted to know on that point how the control measures have been improved, because again, we're looking at one case, that was one audit that was done, an audit that picked up discrepancies in Scharnick's case, but it also then raises the question of how many other cases could have been compromised by corrupt officials who can do similar types of things, maybe cases that we don't know about. So I wanted clarity on that. You spoke about how firearm licenses were acquired. We heard about how cases were dealt with seemingly in a sloppy way when they went to court. But now with your investigation, these cases or whatever you find now will end up in the very same courts, in the very same justice system. So what kind of assurance or what confidence do you have to ensure that this time around your investigation will then be able to get the right people convicted, not just in relation to what Scharnick is involved in, but those that may have assisted him to do what it is that he's done. And the last one is, besides that employee, how complicit is the SAPS itself in assisting Scharnick? We know about this one person. We've spoken a lot about the court process, but surely a lot of it falls at your own doorstep as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. The last one for this round.
Sheriff from East Coast Radio News Watch. I'm not sure if I missed it. The employee in question, did we pick up that this happened in January or now? And if it was picked up in January, what has been done in that time regarding this employee? And what have you found in terms of what have you, I know you've told us that you're still figuring out whether this was a deliberate act or something that, a mistake. So if it was picked up in January, that's a long time period. What have you found?
Thank you so much. Now we'll come to you. We'll take that around.
So if I hold me, I was first.
Oh. There will be 2 minutes. Okay. Just one. Very good.
Can I have it?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So my name is Madlanga Commission, so I work for independent media. So also I'm interested in the employee, but in a position or a position, what a position he or she holds, or if he's still around, I want that. And two, I would like to know the profile of this Scharnick. So tell us more. Where does it come from? Which township, if it's the township? Where does it live? So that we can get our own dots. Because now it is public information that he's the bodyguard of SBA. Now I want to also understand that, okay, so what is going on with this person now? How is ending up now having a job of protecting a senior cop like that? Now we know once we trace who is in that.
Thank you so much, General, and the table. Those are the questions. If we may respond to them, General.
Okay, thank you very much, members of the media. I'll try to package it where the similarities are on a particular aspect. So let me package it in the following way. On the particular individual that we are referring to, in a position. As I indicated, this person is with the Criminal Record Center. So the Criminal Record Center, we will know it's a office that is in the national component. We are not privy to the extent of what is going to happen to that employee, the processes that will unfold within that particular division of that employee. There are integral ethical rules of compliance when an employee is given access to systems, any systems of the Police Service, in terms of a password and your integrity issues in respect of sharing that password, in terms of sharing information from there. So that particular employee is not within the scope of managerial oversight by the province of KwaZulu-Natal. It falls within the Criminal Record Center, and the division will then address that particular individual in terms of both the disciplinary and the legal aspects of what needs to be pursued in terms of that individual. Why we reflected on it, because in the space of determining what is fact and what is fiction, and why suddenly somebody says I've got one case, and then a Lieutenant General stands up and say, no, we are talking about 18 cases. So what informs that? And when we then get to understand what cases we're talking about, we draw the profile of the individual. We go beyond that 18 cases. We pick up something else about this individual. So I think we'll allow the space for that particular division to address the misgivings there. But I think one thing you can take away from it is the fact that even at that level, they don't have an outright way of manipulating the system where we can't track and trace what you've done. Why in January and why now? I would then only safe to say that thank you, Mr. Scharnick, for raising this issue. Because now that we dug into it after you've expressed yourself, you asked us to dig into it, so we've dug into it. And this is where we didn't discover. It's January. We find out now. We didn't find out in January. We find out now that the transaction took place in January. Because there's a person who's very confident that says, no, there's nothing like that on my record. So we said, who's lying? Is it the Lieutenant General is lying now? The system is lying? Who's lying? Then when one made that pronouncement in the media, it prompted us to go and look into this thing. So I wanted to deal with the employee. I hope I've dealt with it, and we've addressed that matter. Let's go to then, why did police not challenge this verdict? Let's look at it like this. For cases that are at court, and it's how it is finalized at court, we did not challenge it because we were not aware of it. Now, remember, in the media space, if you follow the Madlanga Commission, if you follow the ad hoc committee, and many times General Mkhwanazi has come out and talked to the compromising and of certain systems, judicial system, and people are looking for this particular person to be in broad daylight in public. That is called the compromise of the judicial system. You won't find that. When things happen, it's hidden, it's under the table, it's in the darkness of the day. Broad daylight, but in the darkness of the day, when things are done wrongly. So when you look at issues like this, you, the public, will ask yourself, and the DPP, and the Judicial Commission, for these serious offences, and the number of dockets we're talking about, is it appropriate? So when we discover it along the way now because of these things that come out. Again, Mr. Scharnick has told us to go and look into these things. We're looking into it. So I think we must then understand that sometimes you don't find out where the system is compromised. But when you do find out the system is compromised, you go and then you address that part of it. And in that respect, that is why I said to you, we are going to be engaging the NPA, the DPP's office, as well as the Judicial Commission. Then I think the system issue, in any system when it's compromised, there is a risk mitigation process that is followed. The risk mitigation process says that you identify, you isolate, you recover, and then you reintegrate. So in this case, the systems were not compromised by anybody that says that our systems are compromised, and therefore the entire system is then dysfunctional. In this instance, it wasn't an hacking issue. It wasn't a cyber issue. It was an employee whose transaction seems to benefit an individual. So the system itself is not compromised, but the fact that I've highlighted the back end of the system has brought us the evidence to show what took place at the front end of the system. So it doesn't require us in the normal course of shutting down, isolating, stabilizing, recovery. We don't need that process because what has worked for us. What we need to start to look at is a respect of now, I would suggest, it's not my division, and I'm sure that the division will do that within the South African Police Service, and we're going to make that recommendation, that they will start to look at all transactions of deleting that took place in the last maybe few years. And let's look at how many people whose transactions who benefit them in criminal convictions was deleted in the front end of the transaction. So I think we'll have to, we're going to make that recommendation, and we are engaging them. So you'll note we already acquired this information from the very system managers and the custodians of the LCRC and our technology management services. This entire information we have is coming directly through that technology management services, which is then talking to the systems of LCRC. Then I can then address the issue of I think I've dealt with the employee. Scharnick's access to high-profile police officers in KZN, access to politicians. I think one can see the public statements of Mr. Scharnick himself again about whose his friends are and where his friends are. I'm not aware that in KwaZulu-Natal, specifically on a high level, of any politician or police officer that is befriended to the extent of benefiting him in any of his activities. So as the investigation unfolds and we start pursuing certain transactions, who knows, it might tell us that somebody is compromised within our own management, within the junior level, and even at a political level. We will uncover that during the course of the investigations. There's a lot we've uncovered that we didn't know about until Mr. Scharnick took to the media, which prompted us to defend the South African Police Service integrity. So we're uncovering that as we go along. I think there's a question that Darshan was about where is the employee from. I think I've answered that. The control measures I've discussed on the systems. Assurances that it will not repeat itself. Colleagues of the media have already said that when a syndicate, especially organized crime, wants to infiltrate, you will find some individual in the system, employee somewhere, that will compromise himself. And we cannot control it to an extent to say it will never happen again. But there are systems to detect and to understand where it happens and how it happens. And when we do, we then investigate that. One of the things we are very, very hands-on, and we have what we call a investigation district optimization efficiency forum that we have established with the NPA, where we collectively look at the performance of both the courts as well as the investigations. It never existed prior to these years, this particular initiative that we have in place between that's why you find such a close relationship with the prosecution authority currently in KwaZulu-Natal, and we're successful in a number of ways. So even now we can tell you there's a number of initiatives, and I can just mention one. We look at prioritizing cases based on what is these serious and violent crime. For example, what is the backlog on certain cases? What inhibits that backlog on serious cases? Is it an issue of forensic evidence? Is it an issue of laboratory results? And we prioritize together. We make sure that where there are accused and suspects appearing in court, we start to fast track those kind of things. So the relationship that we had then and that we have now is a complete different relationship, and we must appreciate that relationship. We're not, when we make this statement, we're not making it against the current leadership of the judiciary or the current, we're talking about old cases here, in this particular instance, in KwaZulu-Natal. So I want to make that quite clear. We're not talking about the current management or system. We're talking about old cases that were finalized, and we have to go back and see who was part of the process and was it indeed the correct thing to have done, and we'll unfold in that. I think, if there's nothing that I've missed, I've been through all of them. I think I've addressed all of your questions. Yeah?
This one particular question, the last question from William, is waiting for it. Where does this money come from?
On the history that we pick up, it suggests this, in all of the assaults and the GBH, I can put it to you that way. It's in Richards Bay. Richards Bay, right? And when we look at then where is telling us he's no longer there, he's somewhere else now in terms of his new addresses, in terms of the firearm applications, he's no longer, he's in Gauteng now. So is beyond that, we don't have anything that we have looked at in terms of, we do have information that we've picked up on his profile, but one would leave those matters to interrogating them, analyzing them. And so when we come to you in public, we come to you with facts. We don't come to you with speculation. We're not making this media statement to rebut something, but we're making it to put in perspective what is misunderstood about this particular individual and the position of the South African Police Services in respect of the cases that was leveled against him in KwaZulu-Natal. There are other cases I did not mention that was part of the list in other provinces. I did not talk about them simply because it's not my space, and I don't have the detail for those cases, and I didn't see the docket physically, but there are those cases. I can assure you those are different cases. So when you were talking about 18, and I've told you now, I'm talking about 29, there's already a disparity only here in KZN. So other places, there's other cases that I will not comment on in other provinces. Thank you.
Thank you, General. If we can have the last round, I see different follow-up. I see 1, 2, 3. Yeah, only 3 hands. 4. We're done with this 4. We're done. This is the last round.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Nathan, you're the first.
General, just one from me. I know that this employee is going to form a big part of our reporting after this press briefing. So I just want to get some clarity and context. I know you speak here in KZN, but what is the reporting chain for the LCRC? Who's ultimately responsible?
As I indicate, okay, we're taking questions first. Can I answer it? Because it's a short round, this one, Amara. Okay, let's do it one-on-one. It's a short round. As I indicated, that LCRC is managed through the National Officers Division that manages the LCRC, that falls under the auspices of the division. So they will manage that part of it.
No, just for clarity, I'm saying, what is the reporting chain as a division of LCRC?
In the province?
No, nationally.
Nationally.
Where this employee comes from. I'm trying to understand who is the individual who is responsible for matters of the LCRC.
No, I wouldn't want to comment on that, on who's the actual supervisor of this person and who's handling it. We do have an LCRC office in every province. Yeah, we have an LCRC in this province, but it is an extension of the national LCRC. So when you look at that LCRC in the province even, the independence of LCRC, because it manages crime scene and criminal record center, that independence is still there because we don't play judge and jury over the same information in the same office. So that particular office, although it's established in KwaZulu-Natal, it is an extension of a national office for the independence of its work. Same with FSL.
I think a direct question I'm asking is that does Shadrach Sibiya have any control over the office of the LCRC in the reporting structure?
At his time of being at office,
yes,
he would have access to that.
Hi, just a quick one. Just like to know what are the steps or actions now to be taken against Mr. Scharnick? Because I'm sure he's probably watching this briefing as we speak as well.
Of course, members of the media, we don't have an action to take against him. He's made a very clear indication he wants to litigate against SAPS for defaming him. And that's why we are putting into perspective, because we don't want to wait for a litigative process that takes years in court to tell the public what is the position of SAPS. We're telling you now, this is our position in respect of what he's claiming about his defamation and what cases we have. What we can say, and I've said, is that the matters that we have now, because of his pronouncement, and when we looked at the fact to see, does he have something that we have done wrong on. And when we look into it, we realize there's something deeper that one must then ask questions around, which goes back to certain processes within the criminal justice system. And that goes to how his plea was meted out or agreed on. Together then talking about how did he acquire firearms. It brought a lot of things in. So definitely on that part, as part of this investigation, we are going to interrogate those parts. Of course, when the time comes, any official within the South African Police Service, within KwaZulu-Natal, or any other place that enabled or aided a person irregularly so to acquire firearm licenses, to acquire certain privileges on manipulating any system, those are things we will pursue on a criminal level. But I only said the part I will leave to LCRC is the part on the employee. But where there's transactions that took place that was illegal and compromised the law, that's the investigation will continue. And those are the charges we will, at some point when we conclude an investigation, depending on what those charges are and the guidance from the National Prosecuting Authority, we will then be approaching Mr. Scharnick on those ones. But for now, we are not approaching him on anything. We're just clarifying the position of the South African Police Service in respect of what he pronounced in the media that he's going to litigate against us for defaming him. Because any individual of the South African Police Service that says something in a public space and then person says, I'm going to sue the South African Police Service because that person is employed by the South African Police Service. In this case, is Lieutenant General Khumalo. Therefore, it infers that the South African Police Service must interrogate this thing. Now, what alarmed us is that these cases are in KZN. General Khumalo is not here. Lieutenant General Khumalo doesn't work in KZN. He works there, but he knows, and he's talking about our KZN cases. Mr. Scharnick, as if we are non-existent KZN, he talks about it there. So that's what informs us to go and look for these cases, and we draw these case workers. Thank you.
Are we fine with that?
Yeah,
Yes, okay. Okay, thank you.
Still on the employee, General, still on the employee. So I'm not going to understand whether who's working there, SLCS. Is it SAPS members or just an employees? Two, when this guy, maybe, I don't know whether he wants to work for police, this guy, because he's so connected. So where did he work if you hear that in his profile? So the channel guy, I want to know, where did he work? Right. Thirdly, so the firearms he applied and obtained, did that happen? Sorry, did that happen after all these cases so he had? Or
Maybe before General that one, William, on that one of the employee, I think the one was clear that he or she is head office, and who works there is police officers and admin clerk. So it could be any of those.
it's clear.
Yes, then we can is the other one.
As I said to you, in part of the looking into Mr. Scharnick's profile, we, as I said, we picked up a lot of other things. So we will filter what we need to filter in terms of the focus of where we want to look at in terms of what the matters are before us in the public domain. And if there's any other matter that's not in the public domain but it borders on other things, it's of course another investigation that will take its own course. But ours was to address this point of saying the South African Police Service is tarnishing the reputation of somebody, and I've shown you the reputation on record, in writing, in our systems. This is the caliber of person, an individual that says the police is tarnishing him. And I've only cited 29 cases that I was talking about. I didn't talk about the cases. There's another case in another province. I'm talking about and some of them are convictions and all of this things. So when you talk about tarnishing a reputation of a person, what is the reputation? What is the baseline? Where do you start with the reputation? Because when you look at civil litigation, if one doesn't do this briefing the way we're doing it, litigation takes years over time. And you can't correct a reputation of the police later on. We have a massive responsibility to ensure the morale of all our members out there. And when they work within the law. And you can't have somebody with such a rap sheet say, everybody across me is wrong about me. I'm a good guy. And the police is a bad guy. Now, then that tells the public that the police is targeting people unnecessarily, unlawfully. But here's a person that went to court. Look at the number of offenses. So when you say, what are the cases? As those cases get unfolded, we will investigate that. That's why we say we've picked up other things. And the simple one was the firearm. And we didn't know until Mr. Scharnick was talking about him not being a security person. Then somebody sends us a video, and we have the video where he's with a rifle somewhere in public. But we know that the purpose of acquiring that rifle license, we have questioned the process, of course, already. Let's leave the process one side. But we've said, now, if you're not a security guard or officer, why will you have a rifle in a public space as if you are a security officer? And we know for a fact, when you applied for a license, you applied for the license under Section 16 of the Firearms Control Act, which is related to sporting. What sporting you'll be doing in a public open area? Brandishing a firearm, a rifle, by the way. Not any firearm, a rifle. So we were not looking at this before. Now we're looking at it. And then we're looking at our officials. How did he get that firearm license? And the purpose was. So there's a lot that is behind that particular process of the firearms, which we're going to go into. We'll know that it's a process, how you get your license, a long process. So we'll look at that.
The follow-up question about the okay, then it's fine. Thank you so much. The video is referring to, we shared it on the group. I think it's 2 clips on the group. You'll see what Diana is talking about. Colleagues, thank you very much. This is the end of our briefing. Off you go.
Thank you.
That also felt like we're being kicked out of the committee.